My name is Hannah. I was 32 years old the day my mother-in-law stood in front of 300 wedding guests, lifted her champagne glass, and called me the practice wife. Everyone laughed. I still remember the sound of silverware clinking against plates afterward. Nobody looked directly at me, not even my husband. The ballroom smelled like roses and burned butter. My hands were shaking so badly, I spilled wine on the edge of the linen tablecloth, while she kept smiling like she had done nothing wrong. But what none of them knew, not my husband, not his family, not even her, was that I had already seen the message on her phone 2 hours earlier. I knew exactly why she wanted to destroy me. So I smiled back, quietly. Then I walked into the hallway behind the stage and did the one thing she never imagined I would do. By the end of that night, her own voice would tear the entire family apart. And the microphone would make sure everyone heard it. If you've ever sat silent while someone tried to humiliate you publicly, this story is for you. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the truth. The wedding venue sat on the edge of Lake Geneva, all white stone and glass walls. Everything reflected light, even the floor. I remember staring at my own shoes while the valet opened the car door. Beige heels, one scuff near the toe. I rubbed it with my thumb before stepping out. That was the kind of thing I noticed when I was nervous. My husband Ethan walked ahead of me carrying his suit jacket over one shoulder. Navy blue, tailored, expensive enough that I had begged him not to tell me the price. He turned back once and smiled. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. The air smelled like fresh flowers and chlorine from the fountain outside the entrance. Somewhere inside, a piano played softly through hidden speakers. It was Ethan's cousin Rachel's wedding. 300 guests, maybe more. And Diane would be there. I adjusted the pearl bracelet on my wrist before following him inside. The bracelet had belonged to my mother. Tiny cream-colored pearls with a silver clasp worn smooth from years of use. She used to wear it to church every Sunday morning. After she died, it was the only piece of jewelry I kept. Diane hated it. Not openly, never openly. But every time she saw me wearing it, she found a reason to mention how simple it looked. The ballroom glowed gold from hanging chandeliers. Waiters moved through the room carrying trays of champagne. Women in satin dresses laughed too loudly near the entrance bar. Ethan's family fit into rooms like this naturally. I never did. A hostess walked us toward our table while Ethan stopped twice to shake hands with relatives I still could not remember. His family tree spread like a corporation. Everyone had the same teeth and the same careful smiles. Then I saw Deanne. She stood near the center of the room in a dark green gown with beaded sleeves. Perfect posture, perfect makeup, perfect silver hair curled softly at her shoulders. She looked expensive. Her hand rested lightly on someone's arm while she laughed at something I could not hear. And somehow, even across the ballroom, I felt my stomach tighten. "Mom," Ethan said warmly as we approached. Diane turned. For half a second, disappointment crossed her face. Then it vanished. "There you are." She kissed Ethan first. Then she hugged me carefully, like she did not want to wrinkle her dress. "Hannah," she said softly, "you made it." The words sounded polite. Her tone did not. I smiled anyway. Wouldn't miss it. Her perfume smelled like gardenias and something sharper underneath. Alcohol maybe, or hairspray. She leaned back and looked me over quickly. "That dress is brave." I blinked once. "Oh." Ethan laughed awkwardly. "Mom." "What? I meant the color." Diane smiled wider. "Not everyone can pull off cream." The faucet behind the nearby bar dripped once into a metal sink. Nobody spoke for a second. Then Diane touched Ethan's arm again. "Rachel's been asking for you. Go say hello before she disappears into photos." Ethan nodded immediately. "I'll be right back." And just like that, he was gone. That was Ethan's worst habit. He always left rooms right before things became uncomfortable. Diane watched him disappear into the crowd before turning back toward me. "You should really wear your hair up more often," she said. "Your face is thinner that way." I stared at her. "Thank you." She smiled again, calm, elegant, impossible to challenge without sounding dramatic. "That bracelet, though," she added lightly, "you wear it everywhere." My fingers moved instinctively against the pearls. It was my mother. Yes, you've mentioned that. There it was. That tiny edge she always carried. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough for me. A waiter passed carrying smoked salmon appetizers. The smell made my stomach turn suddenly. I had barely eaten all day. Diane lifted a champagne glass from a tray. "You look pale." "I'm fine." "You know," she said quietly, "when Ethan was younger, he hated women who tried too hard to look sentimental." I looked at her carefully. "I'm not trying to look sentimental." "No," she said, "I suppose not." Then someone called her name from across the ballroom. Her entire face changed instantly. Warm, charming, bright. She squeezed my forearm gently before walking away. And I stood there alone beside table 7, pretending I could not feel humiliation settling into my chest like wet sand. 3 days went by. I replayed that sentence every night. No, that is not true. It started long before the wedding. The first time I met Diane was 4 years earlier at a steakhouse in Chicago. She shook my hand and asked where I went to school before the appetizers even arrived. When I told her community college first, then state university after transferring, she smiled too long before taking a sip of wine. After dinner, she hugged Ethan goodbye and whispered something into his ear. I heard only 4 words. "She seems very determined." At the time, I thought maybe I imagined the tone. I did not. By the 2nd year of my marriage, I understood Diane perfectly. She never attacked directly. She repositioned people. Quietly. Like furniture. A chair moved 1 inch every day, until suddenly it no longer belonged where it started. "Hannah." I looked up. Ethan had returned holding 2 champagne glasses. "You disappeared," I said. "I was gone 2 minutes." It felt longer. He handed me a glass. "You're tense." I almost laughed at that. Across the ballroom, Diane stood near the stage talking to Rachel's father. She looked relaxed, confident, in control of everything around her. Even now, her eyes flicked toward us every few seconds. "Watching." "She already started," I said quietly. Ethan sighed through his nose. "Please don't do this tonight." My chest tightened. "I'm not doing anything. She's just being herself." There was the problem. She was. A burst of laughter exploded from a nearby table. Silverware clinked against plates. Someone tested the microphone near the stage, causing a sharp squeal through the speakers. I flinched. Ethan touched my elbow gently. "Can we survive one night without fighting?" The word survive stayed with me. Not enjoy. Not celebrate. Survive. I took a sip of champagne anyway. Flat, warm. "Fine," I said. For a while, things settled. Dinner started. Music played softly. Waiters carried plates of filet mignon and roasted potatoes through the ballroom. Candlelight reflected off wine glasses like tiny fires. I almost relaxed. Then Diane approached our table again, this time carrying a seating chart clipboard. "There's been a small adjustment," she announced pleasantly. Ethan frowned. "What adjustment?" Diane smiled at him first. "Rachel wanted immediate family closer to the dance floor." "We are immediate family," Ethan said. Diane hesitated just slightly. "Yes, sweetheart, you are." Then she looked at me. "But Hannah, dear, would you mind moving down 1 table? Just temporarily." The room suddenly felt warmer. "What?" "It's only for speeches," Diane said smoothly. Space is tight. I looked toward the new table assignment. Table 12. Near the kitchen doors. Far from Ethan. The sound of dishes crashing faintly somewhere behind those doors made my skin crawl. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Mom. What? Rachel asked for this. Diane placed one manicured hand lightly over mine. Cold fingers. It's not personal. That sentence hurt more because she believed it. I stared at the pearl bracelet on my wrist for a second before pulling my hand away carefully. Then I smiled. Small, calm. Of course, I said. Diane's shoulders relaxed instantly. She thought she had won something. Maybe she had. But as she turned to leave, her phone lit up in her hand from a new message. For 1 second, I saw the screen reflected faintly in the silver serving tray beside her. And whatever she read made her smile disappear completely. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Then she hid the screen against her dress and walked away quickly. I noticed something else too. Her hands were shaking. I did not ask why. Not then. Table 12 sat beside the kitchen doors. Every 30 seconds, one of them swung open hard enough to rattle the silverware. Heat rolled out each time, carrying smells of garlic, butter, and burned meat. I could hear cooks shouting over metal pans. Nobody else at the table seemed bothered. A man across from me talked loudly about lake property taxes while chewing steak with his mouth half open. Beside him, his wife kept checking photos of herself from the ceremony. Nobody asked me a single question, which honestly felt better than fake politeness. I kept glancing toward the family tables near the dance floor. Ethan sat beside Diane now. Their heads leaned toward each other in quiet conversation while waiters refilled wine glasses around them. Once, Ethan looked back at me. Only for a second. Then Diane said something, and he turned away again. The kitchen door slammed behind me so hard I jumped. The older woman beside me laughed softly. Nerves. A little. Don't take the seating personally, she whispered while folding her napkin carefully. Diane gets particular at weddings. Particular. That was a generous word for humiliation. The woman gave me a small, sympathetic smile before sipping her wine. I never caught her name, but she looked tired in the way kind people sometimes do around difficult families. A microphone squealed near the stage again. Rachel's new husband tapped it twice. All right, everyone, he laughed. Time for speeches before my new wife changes her mind. Polite laughter rolled across the ballroom. Candles flickered lightly in the air conditioning. I felt sick suddenly. Not physically, something lower, deeper. Instinct, maybe. One by one, people gave harmless speeches. Childhood stories, bad jokes, too many golf references. Then Diane stood. The room reacted immediately. Conversations quieted, heads turned. Even the waiters slowed down. Diane loved attention the way some people loved oxygen. She walked toward the stage in her dark green gown, carrying a champagne glass in one hand and folded speech cards in the other. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. The chandelier light caught against the diamonds in her earrings. My beautiful Rachel, she began warmly, I have watched you grow from a stubborn little girl into a remarkable woman. The audience melted instantly. That was Diane's gift. She knew exactly how to sound loving. Her voice carried smoothly through the ballroom speakers while she told stories about Rachel's childhood vacations and college years. People laughed at the right moments. Even I smiled once or twice despite myself. Then her tone shifted. Subtly. Marriage, Diane said thoughtfully, is such an interesting thing. She paused for effect. You spend years thinking you know someone. Then suddenly you realize people can surprise you. A few guests chuckled softly. I felt my stomach tighten. Diane looked directly at Ethan. When Ethan was younger, he fell in love every 6 months. Laughter. Ethan smiled awkwardly into his wine glass. "Oh, yes," Diane continued. "There was the yoga instructor in Denver, the bartender in Seattle, that actress whose name I still can't pronounce." More laughter. Then Diane looked toward me. "And now Hannah." The room quieted slightly. I felt heat rise into my neck. Diane smiled wider. "Of course, every man needs a practice wife before finding himself." Several people laughed automatically. Not loudly, but enough. Enough for me to hear it. The sound hit harder than yelling would have. A fork scraped slowly against porcelain somewhere near the stage. I looked at Ethan. He did not laugh, but he did not stop her either. That hurt worse. Diane lifted her champagne glass casually. "Relax," she said toward the crowd. "I'm teasing. Hannah knows our family humor by now." I realized then that everyone was watching me, waiting to see how I reacted. My fingers tightened around the pearl bracelet, so hard the edges pressed into my skin. The ballroom suddenly felt too bright, too warm. I forced a smile anyway. Small, controlled. People relaxed instantly after seeing it. That was the strange thing about humiliation. If you smiled while it happened, everyone pretended it was harmless. Diane continued her speech like nothing happened. "To Rachel and Adam," she said smoothly, "may your marriage be filled with honesty, loyalty, and permanence." That last word landed like a thumb pressed into a bruise. Permanent. Then she raised her glass. "To real love." The audience applauded. Champagne glasses clinked together across 300 tables. I sat perfectly still. The kitchen door opened behind me, releasing a burst of steam that smelled like scorched cream sauce. My eyes burned suddenly, and for one terrible second, I thought I might cry in front of everyone. So I stood up instead. Quietly. Nobody stopped me. I walked toward the restroom hallway beside the ballroom entrance, while applause continued behind me. My heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. Too fast. I slowed down near the hallway mirror. My face looked pale under the lights. My mascara had smudged slightly beneath one eye. I stared at myself for a moment. Then I laughed once. Just once. Because practice wife. Jesus Christ. The faucet in the restroom ran ice cold over my wrists. I stood there breathing slowly while two bridesmaids whispered near the mirrors, pretending not to look at me. One of them finally said softly, "I can't believe she said that." Neither could I. But part of me could. That was the problem. On the counter beside the sink sat a bowl of mints wrapped in gold paper. I unwrapped one slowly just to keep my hands busy. My phone buzzed in my purse. "Itia Chan. You okay?" I stared at the screen. Then typed, "Fine." 3 dots appeared instantly, like he wanted to say more. Then vanished. No second message came. Outside the restroom hallway, the music started again. Frank Sinatra this time. Normal wedding sounds. Normal wedding laughter. Meanwhile, my chest felt hollow. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I had already made my decision. I was leaving after dinner. No scene. No confrontation. I would survive the evening politely and never attend another one of Diane's family events again. Simple. At least that was the plan. When I stepped back into the hallway, I almost collided with 2 older women standing near the ballroom doors. They lowered their voices immediately after seeing me. But not fast enough. "She finally did it," one whispered. The other shook her head. "Honestly, I thought she'd wait until after the honeymoon." I slowed slightly. Neither woman noticed. "The divorce thing," the first one asked quietly. "Mum." My stomach dropped. Divorce. The word stayed, suspended in the air between them. I kept walking without turning around. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe not. Inside the ballroom, dinner plates were already being cleared. The lights had dimmed lower now, turning the room amber and soft. People looked happier after alcohol. I searched for Ethan automatically. He stood near the stage, speaking with Diane again. Always Diane. As I approached table 12, someone brushed past me hard enough to knock my purse sideways against my hip. "Sorry," a voice muttered. I looked up. Diane. She barely paused before continuing toward the backstage hallway beside the stage. But something felt off. Her smile was gone completely now. And she was typing rapidly on her phone without looking where she walked. A second later, the screen lit briefly in her hand. Just long enough for me to catch part of the message preview. After the divorce papers. My breath caught. Diane disappeared behind the backstage curtains before I could read the rest. And suddenly, the wedding no longer felt like a wedding at all. It felt like a meeting I had not been invited to. What I did not know then, what none of them knew, was that the answer had been inside that ballroom the entire time. I did not follow Diane immediately. That is the part people always expect when I tell this story later. The dramatic confrontation, the spying, the woman hiding behind curtains listening to secrets. But real life does not happen like movies. Real life happens slowly. You spend 20 minutes convincing yourself you imagined something before finally admitting you did not. I stood beside table 12, pretending to drink water while my thoughts turned in circles. Divorce papers. Maybe they were talking about someone else. Maybe Rachel's husband had an ex-wife. Maybe I was paranoid. The kitchen doors slammed open again behind me. A waiter rushed past carrying empty champagne bottles in a gray plastic tub. Glass clinked sharply together. My head hurt. Across the ballroom, guests crowded toward the dance floor while Sinatra faded into louder music. Rachel laughed as someone spun her under hanging lights. Cameras flashed every few seconds. Everyone else looked normal. That almost made things worse. Ethan still stood near the stage talking with his uncle now. Relaxed posture, calm face. If he knew something, he hid it well. Or maybe I no longer knew what calm looked like on him. I checked my phone. Nothing. No messages, no explanation. Just the lock screen photo from our honeymoon in Maine 2 years earlier. Ethan holding a paper coffee cup while wind pushed his hair sideways near the harbor. We looked happy there. I slipped the phone back into my purse before I could think too hard about it. Then I saw Deanne again. She emerged briefly from the backstage hallway carrying her phone against her chest. Her eyes moved quickly around the ballroom before landing on Ethan. She gave him a tiny nod. Not warm. Not motherly. A signal. Ethan immediately excused himself from his uncle and followed her toward the hallway behind the stage. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That scared me more than panic would have. Because calm meant certainty. Something was wrong. I waited 10 seconds before moving. The closer I got to the backstage hallway, the quieter the wedding sounds became. Music faded behind thick curtains. The carpet changed from soft ballroom patterns to rough black industrial flooring. The air smelled different too. Dust, wires, hot stage lights. Voices echoed faintly ahead. I stopped near the corner before the backstage prep room. Diane was speaking first. Handled this months ago. Her voice sounded sharper now, realer. Ethan answered too quietly for me to hear. Then Diane again. No, Ethan, you avoided it. Silence followed. I stepped closer carefully. A metal rack holding extra chairs stood beside the wall. My heel caught briefly against loose fabric draped over one of them, and I froze, waiting for someone to notice. Nobody did. Then Ethan spoke clearly enough this time. She'll figure it out eventually. Every muscle in my body tightened. Figure what out? Diane sighed heavily. For God's sake, Stop dragging this out because you feel guilty. My mouth went dry. A sound crackled suddenly overhead, making all three of us jump slightly. One of the backstage speakers. Someone testing audio equipment. Deanne lowered her voice after that. I leaned closer instinctively. Too close. My purse slipped off my shoulder and hit the floor with a hard thud. The voices stopped instantly. I grabbed it quickly and stepped backward just as the backstage door swung open. Ethan appeared first. His expression changed the second he saw me. Hannah. I forced my face blank. Oh, there you are. The fluorescent light above us buzzed softly. Diane stood behind him near a folding table stacked with wedding programs. Her phone disappeared into her clutch so fast it almost looked rehearsed. What are you doing back here? Ethan asked. I lifted my purse slightly. Bathroom line was long. Not my best lie. But he nodded anyway. Diane smiled carefully. You look tired, dear. There was something different in her face now. Not confidence. Concern. Not for me. For herself. I glanced briefly toward the folding table behind her. A phone charger, makeup bag, half-empty champagne glass. And Diane's phone lying face down beside them. The screen lit up once from a new notification. Nobody moved. I could only see part of the message, reflected faintly against the metal table leg. She signs first. Then the screen went dark again. Ethan noticed where I was looking. His jaw tightened slightly. What's going on? I asked quietly. Too quietly. That made both of them nervous. Nothing, Ethan answered immediately. Diane crossed her arms. Hannah, this really isn't the place. For what? Neither answered. Somewhere beyond the curtains, the audience erupted into applause for something happening on the dance floor. The sound felt far away now. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. We're at a wedding, he muttered. Can we not do this tonight? There it was again. Not denial. Deflection. I stared at him. And suddenly I knew. Not everything. But enough. Enough to understand that whatever problem existed between us had already been discussed by other people before reaching me. That realization hurt in a very specific way. Like opening a door and finding your own life already packed into boxes. Diane softened her voice slightly. Hannah, marriages go through difficult periods. My chest tightened hard. You're talking about my marriage like it already ended. Nobody said that. You didn't have to. Ethan stepped forward finally. Can we go somewhere private tomorrow and talk? Tomorrow. Not tonight. Tomorrow meant preparation. Prepared explanations, prepared lies. The buzzing fluorescent light overhead flickered once. I almost started crying then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just that terrible pressure behind the eyes when your body realizes something before your mind finishes catching up. I swallowed hard instead. Then I noticed something strange near the wall behind Ethan. A small audio panel. Green lights blinking steadily. Below it, several labels written in black marker. Ballroom main. Stage left. Backstage monitor. One speaker near the ceiling crackled softly again. Connected. The backstage microphones connected directly into the ballroom sound system. Interesting. I looked away before either of them noticed I had seen it. Hannah, Ethan said gently. That tone almost broke me. Because for 1 second, he sounded like my husband again. I nodded once. I should get back. Neither stopped me. As I turned toward the hallway, Diane called softly behind me. Hannah. I paused. When I looked back, her face had changed again. The polished society smile was gone completely now. She just looked old. Tired too. For one brief second, I saw fear there. Real fear. Then it vanished. You deserve honesty, she said quietly. The words landed strangely coming from her. I waited for more. But Ethan's phone rang suddenly in his pocket. He pulled it out immediately, glanced at the screen, and cursed under his breath. I have to take this. He stepped farther backstage, toward the storage rooms before answering. Diane watched him leave. And something about her expression shifted again. Not anger. Disappointment. Like she had spent years building something fragile and finally realized it might collapse anyway. I should have walked away then. Maybe everything afterward would have happened differently. But instead, I looked once more at the blinking audio panel near the wall. Green lights. Steady connection. And for the first time that night, a thought entered my mind that scared me. Not revenge. Control. Nothing happened for 2 weeks, then something did. At the time, though, all I knew was this. Whatever secret they were hiding had already started leaking through the cracks. And somewhere inside that ballroom, the truth was waiting for a microphone. I returned to table 12, pretending nothing had happened. That was becoming my special skill. Smile politely, sit straight, pretend your marriage is not dissolving 10 feet behind a curtain. A waiter placed coffee beside me without asking. Dark roast, too bitter. Steam curled upward between us while the older couple across the table argued quietly about airport parking. Normal conversations. Normal lives. Meanwhile, my hands would not stop shaking. I slid them beneath the tablecloth. Across the ballroom, Ethan had not returned yet. Diane had. She sat beside Rachel's mother near the dance floor smiling at relatives like she had never stepped backstage at all. Every few minutes, someone leaned down to compliment her speech. She accepted every compliment gracefully. Practice wife. The phrase kept replaying in my head like a bad song. Not because it embarrassed me, because it revealed intention. That speech had not slipped out accidentally. She wanted me smaller. Publicly, I stared down into my coffee. Oil shimmered faintly on the surface under chandelier light. Then my phone buzzed once against my lap. Unknown number. You should leave before dessert. I froze. Read it again. Then again. No name attached. No explanation. Just that sentence. The kitchen doors burst open behind me, carrying a wave of heat and burned sugar from the dessert station. My stomach turned hard. Someone knew. Or wanted me scared enough to think they knew. I looked around slowly. Nobody at the table seemed interested in me. Guests laughed near the dance floor while cameras flashed around Rachel and her husband. Then I noticed Diane watching me. Directly. Her expression remained pleasant for anyone else looking, but her eyes dropped briefly toward my phone before lifting again. She knew I received something. A cold feeling crawled slowly through my chest. 3 songs later, Ethan finally returned. He sat beside me heavily. You disappeared, I said quietly. So did you. His tie hung slightly loose now. His hair looked messier too, like he had been pulling at it with his hands. I studied him carefully. Who called? Work. At 9:30 at night. It happens. The lie came too quickly. I watched him reach for his wine glass. His fingers trembled slightly near the stem before steadying again. Just barely noticeable. Most people would have missed it. I did not. Ethan avoided my eyes while cutting into his steak. Then he finally muttered, "Can we please get through tonight first?" There it was again. Through tonight. Like something waited on the other side of it. I leaned closer. Are you leaving me? His knife stopped moving instantly against the plate. The scraping sound cut short. For a second, he looked honestly stunned that I said it aloud. Then his face closed again. Hannah, that's not an answer. The ballroom lights dimmed suddenly for the next dance. Applause rose near the stage while couples moved toward the floor. Ethan lowered his voice. Not here. Then where? He rubbed his forehead slowly. I don't know. That hurt more than anger would have. Because confusion can still love you. Indifference usually cannot. Before I could answer, Diane appeared beside the table again. Perfect timing. Ethan, she said lightly, Rachel's photographer wants family photos near the lake entrance. Then her eyes shifted toward me. Hannah, could I borrow you for a second first? Borrow. Like I belonged to her somehow. I stood anyway. The pearl bracelet slid cold against my wrist as I followed Diane toward the backstage hallway again. This time, she did not pretend politeness. The second the ballroom music faded behind us, her shoulders dropped sharply. You need to stop pushing him tonight. I stared at her. Excuse me. You heard me. The fluorescent light above us buzzed louder than before. Somewhere deeper backstage, a dishwasher sprayed continuously like heavy rain. Diane crossed her arms tightly. He's under enough pressure already. My husband is avoiding me, and you're talking about pressure. She inhaled slowly through her nose. You always make things emotional. I almost laughed. What does that even mean? It means every conversation becomes a crisis with you. The calmness in her voice made everything worse. Like she had rehearsed this. I looked toward the black stage curtains behind her. So you humiliate me in front of 300 people first. That was a joke. No, it was. For the first time all night, Diane's composure cracked slightly. Fine, she snapped quietly. It was honesty. The words hung there between us. Raw. I felt my heartbeat slow again. Dangerously calm. What honesty? Diane studied me for several seconds before answering. Then she said the cruelest thing softly. Almost kindly. You really think he chose you? The buzzing light overhead flickered once. I could smell dust heating inside the fixture. My throat tightened immediately. Diane stepped closer. Hannah, you are a comfortable decision. You are stability, structure. You helped him financially when he was struggling, and he appreciated that. Appreciated. Past tense. He loves me. Diane looked genuinely sad hearing that. And somehow that expression hurt worse than mockery. Oh, honey, she whispered. I nearly broke then. Not visibly. But internally, something bent hard enough that I heard it. My fingers dug into the pearl bracelet, so tightly, the clasp pressed painful little marks into my skin. I thought about my mother suddenly. About her sitting at our kitchen table years earlier peeling apples, while warning me never to beg anyone to stay. If somebody has to be convinced to love you, she used to say, they already made their choice. The memory hit so fast I had to look away. Diane noticed. Of course she did. She lowered her voice further. You're not a bad person, Hannah. That's the tragedy here. Tragedy? Like our marriage was already dead, and she was offering flowers. I swallowed hard enough to hurt. Does Ethan know you talk to me like this? Yes. That answer came immediately. No hesitation. No guilt. The hallway suddenly felt colder. I stared at her face, searching for exaggeration. There was none. A cart rolled loudly somewhere backstage carrying stacked champagne glasses. The rattling sound echoed through the corridor. I forced myself to breathe evenly. What exactly is the plan here? Diane opened her mouth. Then stopped. Because someone had entered the hallway behind us. Ethan. He looked between both of us instantly. What's going on? Neither of us answered right away. Diane recovered first. Hannah seems overwhelmed. I laughed once under my breath. Ethan looked exhausted suddenly. Not angry. Just tired. That scared me more. Because tired people stop fighting for things. I told you both, he muttered. Not tonight. Not tonight again. Always later. Always delay. Always another hallway, another conversation, another excuse. Then I noticed something small. Ethan would not look directly at me anymore. Not fully. His eyes kept sliding away after 1 second. Like guilt physically hurt. The backstage speaker crackled overhead again, with faint ballroom music bleeding through static. Connected. Still connected. I glanced once toward the blinking audio panel near the wall. Green lights. Steady. Diane followed my eyes briefly before looking away too fast. Interesting. Very interesting. Ethan stepped closer carefully. Hannah, can we please just finish the reception? The word finish settled heavily between us. Like completion. Like ending. Before I could answer, someone shouted from the ballroom entrance that family photos were starting immediately. Diane straightened her dress automatically. Mask back on. She touched Ethan's arm softly before walking away. But just before disappearing through the curtain, she paused, turned slightly toward me, and smiled. Small. Confident. Like she believed the hardest part was already over. What I did not understand yet was this. People become careless the moment they think they have already won. Family photos took almost an hour. An hour of smiling beside people I no longer trusted. The photographer kept arranging everyone under white string lights near the lake entrance while cold wind pushed across the water. Diane stood beside Ethan in almost every photo somehow, always close enough to touch him. Every time the camera flashed, my eyes hurt. I remember strange details from that hour. A child dropping a cupcake onto the stone walkway. Rachel crying because her veil kept blowing sideways. A drunk uncle asking me twice where I was from even though we had met before. That is how shock works sometimes. Your brain saves useless details because the important ones hurt too much. By the time photos ended, the ballroom had shifted into late-night wedding energy. Shoes abandoned under tables, lipstick stains on wine glasses, ties loosened, people louder now. The band started playing old dance songs near the stage. I stood near the hallway entrance, pulling pins from my hair one at a time, while Ethan spoke quietly with his cousin across the room. He still had not explained anything. Not really. Just fragments. We'll talk tomorrow. It's complicated. You're upset right now. Every sentence built to avoid the real one. Finally, I walked over to him directly. We're leaving. He looked surprised. What? I'm tired. I want to go home. For a second, relief crossed his face so quickly I almost missed it. Then guilt followed immediately afterward. Okay, he said softly. Too easy. That answer hurt. Because a man fighting for his marriage does not sound relieved when his wife wants to leave. I looked away before he saw my reaction. The ballroom smelled heavily of spilled champagne now, sweet and sour together. Diane approached before we could move. Leaving already? She asked brightly. Ethan answered first. Hannah's tired. Diane's eyes slid toward me carefully. Well, she said smoothly, it has been an emotional evening. I almost responded. Almost. Instead, I adjusted my bracelet and said calmly, Congratulations on the speech. People will remember it. For 1 second, something uncertain crossed Diane's face. Then she smiled again. Oh, Hannah, you know our family. No. I thought quietly. I'm starting to. Outside, the air hit cold against my skin. The valet lane glittered under soft yellow lights while expensive cars rolled slowly toward the entrance. Somewhere behind the building, lake water slapped quietly against the dock. Ethan walked beside me in silence. Not touching me. Not speaking. Just silence. At the car, he finally unlocked the doors and stopped moving. Hannah. I waited. His jaw tightened. Then loosened again. I'm sorry about tonight. Not enough. For which part? He leaned one hand against the roof of the car. All of it. I stared at him under the valet lights. The man I married looked exhausted suddenly, older somehow. And for one dangerous moment, sympathy almost overpowered anger. That was always my weakness. Ethan knew how to look wounded. I need the truth, I said quietly. You'll have it. When? He did not answer immediately. The valet station printer buzzed loudly nearby, spitting out another ticket. Finally, Ethan whispered, soon. I nodded slowly. Because I understood then. Soon meant after decisions were already made. I climbed into the passenger seat without another word. The drive home lasted 1 hour and 19 minutes. Rain started halfway there. Soft at first, then heavier. The windshield wipers moved steadily back and forth, while highway lights smeared gold across wet glass. Ethan kept both hands tight on the steering wheel the entire drive. No music. No conversation. At 11:43 p.m., he finally spoke. Mom shouldn't have said that. No. She was drinking. I laughed quietly at the windshield. There it is. What? The excuse. Ethan sighed hard through his nose. You always think everything is manipulation. Because it usually is. The rain intensified suddenly, hammering harder against the roof. Ethan lowered his speed slightly. Then he said something that sat inside my chest for weeks afterward. You make things harder than they need to be. Not cruel. Not loud. Almost tired. But devastating. Because deep down, I realized he believed it. I turned toward the window after that. Streetlights passed across the glass in long yellow streaks. Neither of us spoke again. For 1 week, I thought it was over. Not fixed. Not healed. Just over enough to survive. The next morning, Ethan acted softer. Careful. He brought coffee into the bedroom at exactly 7:15 a.m. like he used to during our first year married. 2 sugars. Too much cream. The way I liked it. I scheduled dinner for tomorrow, he said gently while handing me the mug. Just us. I nodded cautiously. That evening, he ordered takeout from my favorite Thai place without asking. The next day, he texted me during work hours again. Small things, familiar things. Almost normal. And slowly, against my better judgment, hope returned. Not fully. But enough. Enough to make me doubt myself. Maybe Diane acted alone. Maybe Ethan froze under pressure. Maybe marriages survive ugly moments sometimes. The human mind will build entire alternate realities if the truth feels too painful. 1 week later, on Friday afternoon, I sat alone in my office finishing payroll reports when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. Hello. Static crackled briefly. Then a woman's voice said quietly, You should know he already agreed. My entire body went still. Who is this? Silence. Then, he was supposed to tell you after the wedding. The line disconnected immediately. I stared at the phone. The office printer hummed softly nearby, while someone laughed in the hallway outside my door. Normal sounds. Normal afternoon. Meanwhile, my marriage tilted sideways again. At 5:42 p.m., Ethan came home carrying grocery bags and smiling carefully like he had practiced the expression in the car. How was work? I watched him unpack strawberries onto the counter. Normal husband movements. Normal domestic life. And suddenly, I could not stand it anymore. Who called you backstage? His shoulders stiffened instantly. Only for a second. Then relaxed. Work. Still lying. Ethan slowly placed the strawberries down. The kitchen smelled like basil and rain from the open window above the sink. Hannah. No, don't do that voice. He closed his eyes briefly. That was enough. Enough confirmation. I stepped backward slowly from the counter. You knew. His face changed immediately. Fear now. Real fear. Knew what? About the speech, about your mother humiliating me. That's not true. But he said it too fast. I felt something inside me go cold. How long? I whispered. He rubbed both hands down his face hard. I told her not to say it exactly like that. The room blurred slightly around the edges. Not because I cried. Because I stopped breathing correctly. You knew, I repeated. Ethan stepped toward me. Hannah, listen to me. No. I backed away again. Too quickly. The pearl bracelet caught against the kitchen drawer handle. Then snapped. The sound was tiny. Almost delicate. But it felt like a gunshot. Cream-colored pearls scattered across the hardwood floor in every direction. Both of us froze. One rolled beneath the refrigerator. Another bounced against Ethan's shoe. I stared downward silently. My mother's bracelet. Broken. Ethan bent immediately. I'm sorry, I'll fix it. Don't touch it. My voice came out sharp enough that even I flinched. The kitchen faucet dripped once into the sink. Ethan stood slowly again. And then his phone buzzed against the counter between us. One message preview lit the screen. From Diane. Once she signs, we can finally move on. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The only sound came from one loose pearl, still rolling slowly across the floor. I do not remember leaving the kitchen. 1 second, I stood staring at Ethan's phone. The next, I was sitting alone in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my palms hurt. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield again. The broken pearl bracelet lay in the passenger seat, wrapped inside a paper towel. I could still hear that message in my head. Once she signs, we can finally move on. Not if. Once. Like my marriage had already become paperwork. The dashboard clock read 6:03 p.m. Inside the house, Ethan had not followed me yet. That almost hurt more than the message itself. I watched our front door through the rain-covered windshield, waiting for him to come outside. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Nothing. Finally, my phone buzzed. Itia Chan. Please come inside. No apology. No explanation. Just please come inside. I laughed once under my breath. Then cried immediately after. Not loud. Just one ugly sound escaping before I covered my mouth with my hand. The steering wheel smelled faintly like leather cleaner and cold air. My mascara burned under my eyes. For 1 full minute, I honestly thought about driving away forever. No goodbye. No confrontation. Just disappearing before they could rewrite me into the villain too. Then another message arrived. Not from Ethan. Di honey. This is painful for everyone. Dragging it out helps nobody. I stared at the screen, so long it dimmed black in my hand. Painful for everyone. That sentence changed something inside me. Because until then, I still believed they felt guilty. But guilt sounds different from inconvenience. I looked toward the passenger seat again. The broken bracelet rested there quietly under folded paper towels. My mother used to repair jewelry at the kitchen table with tiny silver pliers and reading glasses sliding down her nose. Broken things tell the truth, she once said. You can always see where the pressure happened. I wiped my face hard with my sleeve. Then I started the engine. Not to leave. To drive back. Back to the wedding venue. Even now, I cannot fully explain why. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted proof. And somewhere deeper, quieter, colder, I wanted them to stop controlling the story. The ballroom still glowed when I arrived. The wedding had shifted into after-midnight chaos now, drunk dancing, shoes abandoned under chairs, half-empty champagne bottles everywhere. Nobody noticed me entering again. That felt useful. The front hostess station sat empty, except for stacked programs and abandoned flower petals scattered across the marble counter. Music thundered softly through the walls. I moved toward the backstage hallway automatically. Same rough carpet. Same buzzing fluorescent lights. Same smell of dust and overheated wiring. The audio panel still blinked green near the wall. Connected. Steady. A voice echoed faintly from deeper backstage. Diane. I slowed immediately. She's emotional right now, she was saying. Another voice answered. Ethan. Too muffled to understand clearly. I stepped closer carefully until I reached the edge of the black curtains near the storage room entrance. Diane stood beside a folding table, holding a champagne glass. Ethan leaned against the wall across from her, looking exhausted. His tie hung completely loose now. For a second, neither spoke. Then Diane sighed sharply. You should have handled this months ago. I know. You let her believe things that weren't true. That sentence hit hard. Ethan rubbed his eyes. I was trying not to destroy her. Diane laughed quietly. And now? Silence. Long silence. Then Ethan finally whispered. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Something inside my chest twisted painfully hearing that. Because part of me still loved him enough to hear confusion instead of cruelty. Diane softened slightly. She's strong. She'll survive this. Survive. Again that word. Not save. Not fix. Survive. I pressed one hand against the curtain just to steady myself. And that is when I noticed the microphone. A wireless handheld microphone rested on the folding table beside Diane's clutch purse. Powered on. Tiny green light glowing near the base. Connected. My eyes shifted slowly toward the audio panel across the hallway. Green lights blinking steadily. Still live. Neither of them noticed. Diane took another sip of champagne. She was never right for this family. Ethan did not answer. That silence hurt worse than agreement. Then Diane continued. She made herself useful, yes, financially especially, but love and dependency are not the same thing. I felt physically cold hearing that. Ethan looked down toward the floor. You think I don't know that? Diane's voice softened again. You deserve someone who understands your world. My fingers curled tightly against the curtain fabric. Then Ethan said something that almost stopped my heart completely. She trusted me. Quiet. Small. Broken. Diane stepped closer to him. And that's exactly why you need to end it cleanly. The microphone sat between them, silently capturing every word. I looked around instinctively. Nobody else nearby. Music still booming faintly through ballroom walls. Then suddenly, a burst of applause erupted from the ballroom itself. At the exact same moment, one of the backstage speakers crackled loudly overhead. Feedback squealed. Diane jumped slightly. What was that? Ethan glanced toward the audio panel. Probably nothing. But he did not move to check it. Neither did she. The microphone remained on. Still connected. Still listening. And something dangerous happened inside me then. Not rage. Clarity. Slow and cold. I stepped silently farther behind the curtain and pulled out my phone. The camera app opened automatically. Recording. Just in case. Diane continued speaking. I tried to warn you before the wedding. Ethan gave a tired laugh. You've been trying to warn me for 4 years. Because I was right. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The sentence 300 guests would hear less than 60 seconds later. Diane lifted her champagne glass and said calmly, the practice wife's speech should have embarrassed her enough to leave on her own. At first, nothing happened. Then the ballroom music cut out abruptly. Complete silence flooded through the walls. And suddenly, Diane's voice exploded through every speaker in the building. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. Embarrassed her enough to leave on her own. Both of them froze. So did I. For one stunned second, nobody understood what happened. Then the ballroom speakers carried Ethan's voice next. Mom. Louder now, public now. Panic entered his tone instantly. Diane's face drained completely white. The microphone. Still live. Still broadcasting. The silence from the ballroom became terrifying. No music. No movement. Just hundreds of people listening. Then Diane whispered the worst possible thing directly into the microphone. She was supposed to sign the papers quietly. The words echoed across the entire venue. A fork crashed loudly somewhere out in the ballroom. Then another. Then complete silence again. Ethan lunged, suddenly toward the folding table, grabbing for the microphone. Too late. Because now both their voices filled every speaker in the building. Every hallway. Every table. Every corner of that wedding. What the hell did you do? Ethan hissed. I didn't. Yes, you did. Guests began appearing near the hallway entrance now. Confused faces first. Then shocked ones. Rachel's husband stepped through the curtains looking pale. Behind him, more relatives gathered slowly. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Deanne looked around wildly at all the faces staring back at her. Her perfect control shattered in real time. And then, from somewhere deep inside the ballroom, one single person started clapping slowly. Deliberately. Once. Twice. 3 times. I could not see who it was. But the sound echoed through the entire building like judgment. Nobody moved at first. That was the strangest part. 300 people hearing a family implode in real time, and still nobody moved. The ballroom remained frozen under chandelier light, while the last traces of microphone feedback hummed softly through the ceiling speakers. Diane stood perfectly still, beside the folding table. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand hard enough to make the liquid ripple. Ethan killed the microphone finally. Too late. Far too late. The damage had already spread across the room like smoke. Rachel's husband spoke first. Very quietly. What papers? Nobody answered him. A woman near the hallway covered her mouth with one hand. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. The entire wedding atmosphere had changed shape in less than 30 seconds. Music gone. Laughter gone. Even the air felt different now. Heavy. Diane recovered first. Of course she did. She straightened her shoulders slowly and looked toward the growing crowd near the backstage entrance. This is obviously a misunderstanding. But her voice shook slightly. Tiny cracks. Visible now. Rachel appeared behind the others, still wearing her wedding veil. Mascara streaked faintly beneath one eye from dancing earlier. What misunderstanding? She asked. Nobody looked at me yet. That surprised me. Everyone stared at Diane and Ethan instead. The powerful people. The people who controlled rooms. Until now. Ethan finally noticed me standing behind the curtain. His entire face changed. Hannah. The way he said my name told everyone immediately that I already knew. A murmur passed through the crowd. Small. Uneasy. I stepped forward slowly into the hallway light. My heels sounded too loud against the floor. Diane watched me carefully now. Not cruel anymore. Afraid. Interesting how quickly fear changes people. Rachel looked between all of us. Can somebody explain what's happening? Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it again. Then Diane said sharply, "This is not the time." Rachel laughed once in disbelief. You broadcasted your divorce plan through my wedding speakers. That landed hard. Several people looked away awkwardly. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed continuously above us. I could smell hot dust again from the fixture. Nobody seemed comfortable enough to leave. Because people pretend they hate drama. But they stay. Always. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face hard. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. There it was. Not denial. Confirmation. The hallway shifted instantly after that sentence. People stopped doubting what they heard. Rachel stared directly at him. You were actually divorcing Hannah. Ethan looked toward me finally. And I realized something terrible. He genuinely expected me to help him survive this moment. That instinct wives develop after years together. Protect him, smooth things over, make the room softer. I felt it pulling at me automatically. Then I remembered the text. Once she signs, we can finally move on. And something inside me hardened again. Slowly. Carefully. Like cooling glass. Diane stepped toward the crowd slightly. This situation is private. An older man near the back laughed bitterly. Well, it wasn't private 10 minutes ago. A few nervous chuckles followed immediately before dying again. Rachel removed her veil completely now. Her hands shook while folding it. My wedding, she whispered quietly. Seriously. That sentence somehow hurt more than all the shouting would have. Because humiliation spreads. Collateral damage. I looked at Ethan again. You knew about the speech. Not a question. He swallowed visibly. Hannah. You knew. The silence afterward answered for him. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Rachel's mother sat down slowly on a nearby equipment case, like her legs stopped working properly. Diane's voice sharpened again. Enough. No one listened. For the first time in maybe her entire adult life, Diane gave an order that nobody obeyed. Interesting. Very interesting. I reached slowly into my purse, then pulled out my phone. Ethan noticed immediately. Fear flashed across his face again. What are you doing? I recorded part of it. Gasps. Small ones. Sharp ones. Diane went completely pale. You had no right. No, I interrupted quietly. You lost the right to privacy when you used public speakers. Nobody argued with that. The ballroom behind us remained strangely silent now. Guests lingered near tables, pretending not to watch directly. But every eye kept drifting back toward the hallway. A waiter accidentally dropped a tray somewhere near the bar. Glass shattered loudly across marble. Nobody even flinched. Diane looked toward Ethan desperately now. Say something, her face seemed to beg. Fix this. Control this. But Ethan looked exhausted beyond language. Finally he whispered, Mom, stop. That hit her harder than the microphone ever did. I saw it happen physically. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Like somebody removed a structure holding her upright. And for one brief second, she did not look powerful at all. She looked old. Aging fast right in front of everyone. Then her eyes found me again. And underneath all the fear and humiliation, I saw something else finally. Sadness. Real sadness. Not for me. For herself. Like she genuinely believed this disaster happened because nobody listened to her soon enough. That was the terrifying thing about Diane. She loved people through control. Without control, she had no idea who she was. Rachel spoke again quietly. Did you really call her a practice wife on purpose? Nobody answered immediately. Then Diane said the worst possible thing she could have said. Yes. The room reacted audibly this time. Someone muttered, Jesus Christ. Another relative turned away entirely. Rachel stared at her aunt in open disbelief. Why? Diane lifted her chin slightly. Because dragging out unhappy marriages destroys people. I almost laughed hearing that. Almost. You mean it inconveniences you, I said calmly. Her eyes snapped toward mine. And there it was. The real battle underneath everything. Not class. Not marriage. Control. Diane could not tolerate situations she did not arrange herself. And I had become one. 3 days went by. I replayed that sentence every night. No. Longer than that. For years, I kept trying to earn comfort from people who only respected obedience. The realization came slowly standing there backstage. I had spent my entire marriage shrinking myself to fit into rooms that never wanted me comfortably inside them. The buzzing light overhead flickered again. Then Ethan finally stepped toward me. Hannah, please, can we go home and talk privately? Home. That word sounded strange now. Like a house already sold. I looked at him for a long moment. The man standing in front of me was not evil. That would have been easier. He was weak. Weak enough to let stronger people shape his decisions until he no longer recognized them himself. That kind of weakness destroys people quietly. I took a slow breath. Then I said the sentence that finally ended everything. You already had private conversations without me. Ethan closed his eyes immediately. Like the truth physically hurt. Nobody spoke after that. Then suddenly, Diane's phone started ringing loudly inside her clutch purse. The sound made everyone jump slightly. She ignored it. But the screen kept lighting up over and over with incoming messages. Relatives. Friends. People from the ballroom. The story was already spreading table to table faster than she could contain it. And it got worse. Because near the ballroom entrance, I noticed several younger guests staring down at their phones while whispering urgently. One of them looked up at me with wide eyes. The venue security recording saved the audio, she whispered. Of course it did. Wedding venues recorded everything now. I watched panic finally reach Diane completely. Not emotional panic. Social panic. Reputation panic. The kind she feared most. And somehow, after everything, I felt tired instead of victorious. That surprised me. The hallway smelled like stale champagne and overheated electronics. I suddenly wanted fresh air more than revenge. So I turned toward the exit. Behind me, Ethan said my name one last time. I did not stop walking. Nothing happened for 2 weeks, then something did. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed on the bedside table beside me. Voicemail. From Diane. I almost deleted it unheard. Then I pressed play. At first, all I heard was breathing. Uneven breathing. Then, quietly enough that I almost missed it. Diane was crying. I listened to Diane's voicemail 3 times before sunrise. Not because I enjoyed it. Because I could not reconcile the sound with the woman I knew. Diane did not cry. Not publicly. Not privately either, as far as I had ever seen. But there she was at 2:14 a.m. breathing unevenly into my voicemail like someone lost in the dark. At first, she said nothing. Then finally, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Her voice cracked hard on the last word. The message ended after that. No apology. No explanation. Just grief. I stared at the ceiling afterward while pale morning light slowly pushed through the bedroom curtains. Beside me, Ethan slept facing the opposite wall. Or pretended to. Neither of us touched each other anymore. The silence between us had changed shape completely after the wedding. Before, silence felt temporary. Now it felt furnished. Like something moved in permanently. The house smelled faintly like coffee from the automatic timer downstairs. Outside, rainwater dripped steadily from the gutters. At 7:42 a.m., Ethan finally spoke without turning around. Did you listen to it? Yes. Another long silence followed. Then, she's embarrassed. I almost laughed. Embarrassed. 300 people heard them discuss dismantling my marriage like a business inconvenience, and he called it embarrassment. That told me everything I still needed to know. I sat up slowly. The mattress shifted beneath us. She's not embarrassed because she hurt me, I said quietly. She's embarrassed because people heard it. Ethan rubbed one hand across his face. You think everything is cruelty. No, I answered. I think you confuse guilt with love. That landed. He finally turned toward me then. And for the first time in weeks, he looked honestly devastated. Not defensive. Not tired. Broken. Interesting how truth changes people slower than exposure does. What happened next is not what I expected. And it is not what they expected either. Because later that afternoon, Diane asked to meet me alone. Not Ethan. Not both of us. Just me. I almost refused. But curiosity is powerful after betrayal. Especially when the person who hurt you suddenly stops performing strength. We met at a small cafe near the lake around 4:30 p.m. Cold weather had emptied most of the outdoor tables. Wind pushed dead leaves across the sidewalk while espresso machines hissed behind the counter. Diane already sat inside when I arrived. No makeup. That shocked me first. No diamonds either. Just a gray wool coat and tired eyes. She looked smaller somehow. Human-sized. I sat across from her carefully. Neither of us spoke immediately. A spoon clinked softly against ceramic nearby, while someone steamed milk behind the counter. Finally, Diane folded her hands together. I suppose you hate me. The directness surprised me. I don't know yet. She nodded slowly like that answer felt fair. Outside the cafe window, traffic crawled past through wet streets. Diane stared down into her untouched tea. When I was 29, she said quietly, my husband left me for someone younger. I said nothing. She gave a humorless smile. You probably enjoy hearing that. I don't. And I didn't. That surprised me too. Diane inhaled carefully before continuing. One day he was home, the next day he was. She rubbed her thumb slowly against the teacup handle. People act like betrayal arrives dramatically. Most of the time it arrives quietly. A suitcase missing. Fewer questions at dinner. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. I watched her closely. No manipulation yet. Just exhaustion. I raised Ethan alone after that, she continued. And somewhere along the way, I became terrified of instability. There it was. The hidden engine underneath everything. Fear. Not hatred. Fear wearing expensive clothes and controlling everyone nearby before they could leave first. I thought if I controlled enough, Diane whispered, nothing could surprise me again. For one brief second, I saw her clearly. Not as a villain. As someone who turned pain into management, because management felt safer than vulnerability. It did not excuse anything. But understanding and forgiveness are not the same thing. I folded my hands slowly together. You humiliated me intentionally. Yes. You pushed your son toward divorce instead of honesty. Yes. You discussed my marriage like a legal inconvenience. Her eyes lowered. Yes. At least she stopped lying. That mattered more than apologies suddenly. A waitress set fresh coffee beside me. The smell rose warm and bitter between us. Diane stared toward the window again. When Ethan lost his consulting job 3 years ago, you kept him afloat financially. I nodded once. I know how much that embarrassed him. That surprised me. Ethan never admitted embarrassment about it. He loved that you saved him, Diane said quietly, but eventually he started resenting needing you. The sentence hurt because I already knew it somewhere deep down. Love mixed with dependency becomes strange over time. Heavy, complicated. Diane finally looked directly at me again. I thought if the marriage ended quickly, he could rebuild before wasting more years unhappy. I almost asked whether my unhappiness counted too. But honestly, the answer already sat plainly between us. No, not to her. The espresso machine screamed loudly again behind the counter. Diane flinched slightly at the sound. Small human reaction. Real. Then she asked softly, "Do you know what frightened me most after the microphone incident?" I waited. That you stayed calm. I blinked once. She gave a weak smile. Angry people can be managed. Quiet people usually already decided something. Interesting. Because she was right. I had decided. Not revenge. Not exposure. Freedom. The realization settled into my chest, quietly, while rain tapped against the cafe windows. I reached into my purse, then carefully removed the broken pearl bracelet wrapped in tissue paper. Diane stared at it silently. "The clasp snapped," I said. She looked genuinely sad seeing it. Not performative. Not strategic. Just sad. "My mother used to repair jewelry herself," I continued quietly. "She always said broken things reveal where pressure lived the longest." Diane swallowed visibly. Neither of us spoke for several seconds after that. Finally, she whispered, "I never wanted to become this person." I believed her. That was the complicated part. Most terrible people do not wake up planning to become terrible. They just keep choosing control over honesty until eventually they cannot tell the difference anymore. Outside, evening light dimmed slowly across the lake. I stood first. Diane looked up immediately. "So this is it?" she asked. I considered the question carefully, then answered honestly. "For me, yes. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just true." She nodded once. And suddenly, she looked very tired again. Before leaving, I placed the bracelet gently on the table between us. Not as forgiveness. As acknowledgement. Broken things. Visible pressure. Diane touched the pearls carefully with trembling fingers after I turned away. And as I walked toward the cafe door, she asked one final question quietly behind me. "Did Ethan ever really love you?" I stopped. The answer came easier than I expected. "Yes," I said softly. "He just loved avoiding conflict more." Then I left. That night, Ethan waited for me at the house, sitting alone at the kitchen table. The same kitchen where the bracelet broke. The same floor where pearls scattered. A single lamp glowed above him, while rain tapped softly against the windows again. He looked up immediately when I entered. Red eyes. No sleep. "I've been thinking all day," he said quietly. I set my purse down carefully. "So have I." The kitchen smelled faintly like cold coffee and dish soap. Neither of us moved closer. Finally, Ethan whispered the question that mattered most. "Were you ever going to forgive me?" Ethan's question stayed, suspended between us. The kitchen light hummed softly overhead, while rain tapped against the windows in uneven little patterns. "Were you ever going to forgive me?" I looked at him across the table. Really looked at him. Not as my husband. Not as the man I used to defend automatically in every room. Just a person. Tired, guilty, frightened. Human. The strange thing about heartbreak is this. The worst moment is not always when trust breaks. Sometimes it is the moment you realize love survived longer than respect did. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly. The hardwood floor creaked beneath the legs. Ethan rubbed both hands together nervously before speaking again. I didn't know how to stop any of it. There it was. The core truth underneath everything. not cruelty. Cowardice. And cowardice can destroy people just as completely. I folded my coat carefully across my lap. You could have told me. I know. You could have defended me during the speech. I know. You could have told your mother to stay out of our marriage years ago. His eyes lowered immediately. I know. The faucet dripped once behind us. Neither of us moved. Finally, Ethan whispered. I thought avoiding the conflict would buy me time. No, I said quietly. It just transferred the damage onto me. That sentence landed heavily. I saw it happen in his face. For years, Ethan survived difficult situations by delaying them until someone else absorbed the consequences first. His mother controlled. He avoided. And I adapted around both of them until I barely recognized myself anymore. The realization hurt. But it also clarified things. Outside, headlights passed slowly across the wet street beyond our kitchen window. A normal neighborhood night. Meanwhile, our marriage sat quietly dying beside a sink full of clean dishes. Ethan inhaled shakily. I did love you. I believed him. That was the tragedy. Love existed here. Just not the kind strong enough to protect anything. I looked down at the kitchen table, remembering the sound pearls made scattering across the floor. Tiny impacts. Tiny fractures. Relationships rarely explode all at once. Usually, they break exactly like that. One small failure, rolling away from another. I met with your mother today, I said finally. His head lifted sharply. You what? She told me about your father. Ethan leaned back slowly into his chair. The surprise on his face looked genuine. She never talks about that. She did today. The rain outside softened into a faint mist now. Somewhere upstairs, the old hallway vent rattled lightly when the heater turned on. Ethan stared at the table for several seconds. Then he laughed quietly without humor. She thinks controlling people keeps them from leaving. Yes. And I spent my whole life learning that keeping people calm mattered more than honesty. There it was. Generational damage, sitting openly at the kitchen table. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just patterns finally spoken aloud. Interesting how quiet the truth sounds sometimes. Ethan looked toward me again. What happens now? I already knew the answer. That surprised me less than I expected. Because for days, I kept waiting to feel dramatic certainty. Instead, clarity arrived gently. Like exhaustion, finally, deciding something your heart resisted. I'm leaving, I said softly. He closed his eyes immediately. Not shocked. Just hurt. The kind of hurt people feel when consequences finally become real. I watched his wedding ring turn slowly around his finger. You already packed? He asked quietly. Not yet. He nodded once, then asked the question that almost broke me. Was any of it real to you? I laughed softly through sudden tears. Because after everything, that was still his deepest fear. That he imagined us. I wiped beneath one eye quickly before answering. Ethan, I loved you enough to disappear inside this marriage. The room went completely still after that. Even the heater stopped rattling. He looked at me like I had finally translated something he spent years misunderstanding. And maybe I had. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan quietly started crying. Not dramatically. No choking sounds, no collapse. Just silent tears sliding down a tired man's face, while kitchen light reflected softly off the table between us. I had imagined this moment differently before. I thought maybe seeing him cry would feel satisfying. It didn't. It just felt sad. Because consequences are rarely cinematic once they finally arrive. I stood slowly and walked toward the hallway closet where we kept old blankets and winter coats. The cardboard moving boxes sat stacked behind them from our last apartment move. still flattened, still waiting. I carried 2 into the kitchen and placed them gently near the table. Ethan watched silently. The sound of cardboard unfolding echoed, strangely loud through the house. "I'll stay with Claire for a while," I said. My friend Claire had been texting me nonstop since the wedding recording spread through the family. Apparently, several guests uploaded clips before anyone could stop them. One cousin added subtitles. That detail still felt insane to me. Ethan rubbed both palms against his jeans. "I never wanted to humiliate you. I know. And I never planned for everyone to hear that conversation. I know." The microphone. Funny how one forgotten switch changed everything. But deep down, I understood something now. The microphone did not ruin the family. The truth did. The microphone just removed privacy from it. Around midnight, Ethan finally went upstairs to sleep. Or try to. I stayed in the kitchen packing slowly. Sweaters. Books. Coffee mugs Claire bought me years ago. The house creaked softly around me, while rainwater dripped outside from the gutters. At 12:47 a.m., I found the last loose pearl from my bracelet beneath the refrigerator while moving a box of canned food. Tiny. Cream-colored. Almost missed. I sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, holding it carefully between my fingers. Then I smiled for the first time in days. Real smile. Small. But real. 3 months later, winter arrived early. The divorce moved quietly after that. No screaming court battles, no dramatic revenge, just signatures, paperwork, long silences. Diane sent one handwritten letter during the process. No manipulation this time. No performance either. Just one sentence, near the bottom, that stayed with me. "I hope someday Ethan learns honesty feels lighter than avoidance." I never answered. But I kept the letter. Not out of forgiveness. Out of understanding. Claire helped me move into a small apartment above a bookstore downtown. The floors creaked. The radiators hissed constantly. And every morning the cafe downstairs filled the hallway with the smell of cinnamon rolls before 8:00 a.m. For the first time in years, my body stopped bracing itself inside my own home. That mattered more than I expected. One snowy Saturday in December, I sat near the apartment window, repairing my mother's bracelet myself. Tiny silver pliers. Reading glasses sliding down my nose, exactly like hers used to. The repaired clasp looked slightly uneven afterward, but stronger. Outside, snow covered the sidewalks in soft white layers, while people hurried past carrying shopping bags and coffee cups. Warm light filled the apartment. Quiet light. The kind nobody has to earn. My phone buzzed once beside me. A message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then opened it. It was a photo. Rachel's new baby daughter, wrapped in a pink blanket at the hospital. Underneath, Rachel had written, "Her middle name is Hannah." I stared at the screen for a long time after that. Then I laughed softly to myself while snow drifted outside the window. Not because everything healed perfectly. It didn't. Some losses stay tender. Some betrayals leave fingerprints. But warmth returned eventually. Real warmth. The kind built slowly through honesty instead of performance. I fastened the bracelet carefully around my wrist again and looked out at the falling snow. Sometimes the loudest moment of your life is the one where you finally stop defending yourself. And if you've ever been treated like you had to earn basic kindness, remember this. The people who truly love you will never need an audience to prove it.